Maharaj, please accept my most humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Obeisance is all goes to Prabhupada.
Wonderful to see you, Maharaj. Hope the your stay in Bhaktivedanta manner, the weather, and everything else that's going on in the world is keeping you safe, healthy, happy, and blissful as ever.
As you can see, I am quite happily situated and very
Yes,
blissful.
absolutely.
Manor is a wonderful place.
It is indeed, indeed. And I think the weather is also getting better, Maharaj.
Yeah, today temperature is 22 degrees and it's just a little overcast now, but it's pleasant weather.
Excellent, Maharaj. We don't have the benediction of a pleasant weather in this part of the world. We're still running 40 degrees plus, so it's pretty hot here. So we welcome all the devotees who have already signed in to Zoom to the School of Vedic Studies. I'm your host, Rasakrita Parayana Das, and we are very happy, very fortunate and privileged to have His Holiness Atmanivedana Swami Maharaj joining us from the Bhaktivedanta Manor, UK. We are going to have a very interesting uh, presentation from Maharaj on the subject of the, or the title of the subject that is going to be um, discussed is "We are not prepared to surrender. This is our material disease." So, we are all living in times where we are coping up with the COVID 19 pandemic. It is indeed a disease, but there is also a serious disease, is what we will be discussing about. And we are looking forward to the illumination on this particular subject by His Holiness Atmanivedana Swami Maharaj. Before we begin, I also um, am seeking the Maharaj has left for a while, so let him come back. We are, Maharaj, particularly, we are going to be having a few uh, devotees, young children, joining us from the Gopal Fun School. So we seek your blessings for them. At the end of the program, we will ask them to identify. So please, Maharaj, bless them that they continue in their Krishna consciousness. They've been joining our Gopal Fun School weekly programs that are conducted by my wife, Apurva Shakti, and Vrinda. We also have a prayer, Maharaj, at the end of your session. We will do a prayer for um, the one of the child who's been attending the Gopal Fun School. Her name is Akarshana. She is in the hospital for the last 7 days. We received a message from her mother. So we'll seek your prayers and blessings for her well-being, Maharaj, and also of all the assembled devotees. But we will do so at the end of the session. So we will have a 1 hour session with Maharaj, let's say 45 to 50 minutes of Maharaj's presentation, and we will have, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes of a Q&A session. So without much ado, I hand over the mic to His Holiness Atmanivedana Swami Maharaj. His Holiness Atmanivedana Swami Maharaj ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Om Jnanatmindasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshusmritam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurue Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu vivecha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavyo namo namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So today's presentation, as Rasakrita Prabhu said, we are not prepared to surrender. This is our material disease. So this slide is actually very nicely depicting that the Supreme Lord is always very eager to save the living entities who are suffering in this material world. Prabhupada is describing this material world as an ocean of material suffering. And therefore, this picture depicts that a person is drowning in the ocean, which is, of course, metaphorically speaking, the material world. And the Supreme Lord on his transcendental Garuda is trying to help him out of this material suffering situation. So pretty much all of us are in this position that we are kind of inflicted by this material disease. So first and foremost, we got to understand, who am I? This is the material disease. Because when we have the wrong identification, then we try to relate ourselves to this material world and material existence. And mostly we think this body is us, and therefore everything pertaining to the body is most important. But this is causing a confused situation. The risk of not knowing who you are causes confusion. And therefore, to free this confusion, we have to take shelter of the Supreme Lord, because there's none other than the Supreme Lord himself who can guide us out of this entanglement. Of course, the Supreme Lord sometimes comes directly by his own free will, and other times he sends his empowered personalities to show us the guiding light of how to free ourselves from this confusion and understand what is our real goal. In other words, be free from this material disease. Not knowing who we are leads to fear and misidentifying the self. This is, again, the symptom of this disease condition. Because we are not knowing who we really are, then there is always fear and misidentification of who we really are. Unless until we understand who we really are, then it is going to cause a lot of confusion and also lead us in all different paths of trying to find out what is our real purpose. So Krishna is giving us two choices. Krishna says you have two choices. One, surrender to me. Two, surrender to Maya. Of course, Srila Prabhupada explains, in this material world, there are two paths. One is that we take the path of Krishna consciousness and surrender to the Supreme Lord, as Krishna is expecting us to surrender to him. Or if we do not surrender to him, then of course, as I have said, we have two choices, but there is no choice about it. If you do not surrender to Krishna, then you have no choice, but you have to surrender to Maya, because you are in Maya's domain. And as long as you are under Maya's domain, then you will be under the control of Maya. And that is specifically the duty of Mahamaya, to keep the living entities entertained, this material world, making them think that, yes, I am happy, I'm quite happily situated in this world, and I will try to be happy. Of course, this is our illusion. So we have a choice. We surrender to Krishna, then we get to see the spiritual world and be with Krishna in the spiritual world, as Srila Prabhupada explains. In the spiritual world, we are basically freed from all these things of material world. In the spiritual world, there's no fear of death, old age, disease, or fear or need of want. Everything is there, as Prabhupada is many times saying, is kalpavriksha. The trees there are fulfilling all your desires. So therefore, there is no need of suffering from want. That is the place which Krishna is offering us. Now, this place can only be granted, as Krishna says, surrender to me. Second, we are in this material creation, which is, again, the creation of the Supreme Lord to facilitate that if you don't want to surrender to him, then Krishna says, that's fine, no problem. I will create a place where you can fulfill all your desires as you like. And this is the material world of Maya. So we have a choice. Now, which choice we take is, of course, again, given to us to choose freely. Many times we understand from the scriptures, saintly persons, and also Srila Prabhupada describes that we have free choice, free will. We have to use this free will and make our choice. There is no hard and fast force on which choice you make. It is your free will. But Krishna has granted us this free will to utilize that option, whether we take shelter of Krishna or we take shelter of Maya. So again, this is a nice slide which is depicting Krishna, the Supreme Personality, and then under his supervision, there is the energy of Mahamaya, which is depicted here as three young ladies who are manipulating the living entities like a puppet. Puppeteer will pull the strings, and as the strings are pulled, the puppet will dance or act according to the way the strings are pulled. And therefore, we are just like puppets in this material world in the hands of Mahamaya. And therefore, we have to try and understand that in order to be free from these puppeteer strings, Krishna has given us free choice. Krishna says, come to me. And Krishna says, if you come to me, then you will be out of the domain of Maya and you will come into my domain. And when you have come into my domain, then of course, there is no question of Mahamaya interfering with your progress. And as Krishna says, you come to me, I will take care of you, and eventually I'll free you from all your material disease, and then you'll come to me and come back to the spiritual world. So again, this slide is depicting two paths. One path is led by the young lady who is representative of the Mahamaya energy, energy of the Lord. It's enticing, says, come, I'll offer you everything. Prabhupada used the word phantasmagoria, that creates such an illusionary world of make-believe, thinking you'll be happy. So it's enticing you. On the other hand, there are saintly persons who come and tell you, please be awakened from the slumber, awaken to the spirituality, awaken to reality, at your position, and then come, take shelter of Krishna. So at this stage, I'll play a small lecture of Srila Prabhupada. Please hear attentively. This is about 4.5 minutes, and it will give us some insight of what Prabhupada wants to explain to us.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because people misunderstood Krishna. Krishna asked in the Bhagavad Gita that he surrendered. What can he do? He is God, he is Krishna. He asks you, orders you surrender. I take charge of you. Aham Sadhu. But still people misunderstand. Oh, why should I surrender to Krishna? He is also a man like me, maybe a little important. But why should I surrender to him? Because here the material disease is not to surrender. Everyone is baptized. I am something. This is material disease. Therefore, to become cured from this material disease, you have to surrender. Tad vidhi panipatena pariprasnena sivaya upodakshanti tad jnanam jnanina tasadari. So, unless you are prepared to surrender, that is a great difficult job for the materialistic person. Nobody wants to surrender. He wants to compete. Individually, person to person, family to family, nation to nation. Everyone is trying to become the master. So where is the question of surrendering? There is no question of surrender. This is the disease. Therefore, Krishna demands that to cure these rascals dumb or must chronic disease. Surrender. Sarvadharman parittajya mamekam saranam bhaja. If I surrender, then the whole thing will be failure. My business, my plans, my so many things. No, I take charge. I take charge of you. Aham tva sarva papi bhamo krishna. Masu. Don't be worried. Too much assurance. Still you are not prepared to surrender. This is our material. Therefore, Krishna came again as a devotee, just to show how to surrender to Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna Varnam Sita Krishnam Sangapanga Supati. So, Krishna consciousness movement is very scientific and authorized. It is not a bogus thing, something manufactured by concoction of the mind. It is authorized. Based on the Vedic instruction, as Krishna says, Sarvadharman parittajya mamekam saranam braja. So we teach only this philosophy. That is, Krishna, here is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God. You are searching after God. You cannot understand what is God. Here is God, Krishna. His name, his activities, everything is there in the Bhagavad Gita. You accept and surrender unto him. And as Krishna says, Manvana bhavamad bhaktam madhyani namaskuru. So we are speaking the same thing as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita. We don't misinterpret. We don't spoil the whole Bhagavad Gita. We don't do this mischief. Sometimes people, they say, Swami, you have done wonderful. What wonderful? I am not a magician. My only credit is I have not spoiled the Bhagavad Gita as presented as it is. Therefore it is accepted. Thank you very much.
So we can understand from Srila Prabhupada, he has set the tone of what it really means to surrender and free ourselves from this so-called disease of identifying ourselves. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 15th chapter, text 7, Krishna says, Mamaivansa jiva loka, jiva bhuta sanatan, mana sastanandriyani prakrishishtani karsati. So the living entity in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Krishna is very clearly saying that actually you are my eternal fragmental parts. But because you are in a conditioned world and you have voluntarily accepted to be in this conditioned world, then you are struggling very hard with the 6 senses. And the 5 senses plus the mind makes 6 senses. So every one of us is experiencing this. So to be free from that, we have to take shelter of the Supreme Lord. So in this material world, we identify with our body. We think this body is us. So here in this slide, I've depicted a woman and a man. So when there is union between a man and a woman, then the cause of that is the baby. Now the baby is a material body, but that material body becomes alive when the spirit soul enters. And that spirit soul enters the body, then there is the creation of the material body. So this is explained in the Shastra, that the union of man and woman, and the combination of the two, spirit soul enters the body, and then during that interaction, the child is born, and the child will take shape only if the soul is present. Therefore, material body is created. And from the very inception of our creation as in a material body, we begin to identify ourselves that this body is me, and therefore I am. And as we are growing from child, from the age of 5, we begin to see the world around us unfold. And we begin to develop this false proprietorship that everything I see around is mine. Sometimes you will see children are given some toys. They're so attached to their toys, they're saying, this is my toy. But actually that toy is not his. It is bought by the parents, or some well-wishers have given the toy as a gift. But the child begins to develop that attachment. So from the very inception, from the beginning, we begin to develop attachment, mine, mine, mine. And this will lead us to this material disease. And therefore, when we are in this disease condition, we cannot see who we really are. So in these words, the identity of the living entity, identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life, and in his liberated state, he becomes one with the Supreme. So we should not have this false conception also that only as we are in this material world, we have an identity. But once we are liberated from this bondage, then we merge into the Supreme and there is no individuality. Prabhupada is over and over explaining that the individuality is maintained at all times, whether we are separated from Krishna or we are with Krishna. That individuality is always there. And the example is given that the ocean is full of fish. And when the fish is put in the ocean, you only see water, but you don't see the fish unless you go deep into the ocean. And you see that the fish are actually individually, they have not merged into the waters of the ocean. Similarly, we are with Krishna, but we do not merge with him. So he is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said Sanatana. Sanatana means eternal. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva, and the secondary expansions are called Jiva Tattva, the living entities. And that Jiva Tattva, the secondary expansion, is you and me. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion, the living entities, the Jiva, are the separate expansions. By his personal expansion, he manifests in various forms like Lord Rama, Nrsimha, Vishnu Murti, and all the predominating deities of the Vaikuntha planets. The separated expansions, the living entities, are eternally Savyata. So this is also mentioned in the scriptures that the identity of the Jiva is Jivere Swarupa Hoy, Nitya Krishnadas. The Swarupa of the Atma or Jiva is Nitya Krishnadas, eternally servant of Krishna. And because we have forgotten our position as a servant of Krishna, as is mentioned here, eternally we are Savyatas. And what happens is that we try to lord over this material energy and thinking I and me and all that I survey is mine. And therefore I am the controller, Aham Ishvara. So when we begin to think this and actually begin to believe that I am Ishvara, we try to control. And what happens is that unfortunately, we have a very bad experience. When we try to control and we fail in controlling, then we become frustrated. And due to frustration, we become anger. And then that anger leads us into bewilderment and illusion. So as the fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entity also have fragmental portions of his qualities, of which independence is one. As I mentioned earlier on, we have independence, free will, as mentioned here by Prabhupada in the purport, that since we are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, then we have the same quality, but in fragmental portions, in minute quantities. And one of them is independence. Every living entity, as an individual soul, has a personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul. And by proper use of independence, he is always liberated. So again, the choice is ours. If you want to remain illusion under the conditioned state, then we will be in a materially diseased condition. And this disease can be cured simply by proper understanding of our independence directed towards the Supreme Lord, and therefore we will become free and liberated from this conditional disease. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is free from the material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. So again, when we are free from this illusion of this material body, I and mine, Aham Ishvara, and so forth, then we will be cured from this disease. And when we are cured from this disease, then we will understand our eternal position as the servant of the Supreme, and therefore will engage the transcendental service of the Lord. In the conditional life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature. And he forgets that transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. So again, Prabhupada is explaining very clearly that because we have forgotten our actual position, we are controlled by the three modes of material nature, and therefore, due to forgetfulness, we are struggling very hard to maintain our existence in this material condition. The word karsati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. When the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels into the lower species of life. So you very clearly stated that it depends on which mode is influencing us. Accordingly, we will act on that, and whichever act we do, it is no doubt put us in a very difficult situation where we will struggle for basic existence. So this is explained here very clearly, that we are shackled in chains. Whether we like it or we don't like it, we are shackled in chains, not literally, but chains of Maya. And these chains of Maya will then make us act on the Maya's platform. But Krishna is saying, you are not eternally shackled in this material world. You can be freed. You can break those chains and become free from the shackles of Maya. And this can only happen, as Krishna says, surrender unto me, come to me. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, text 66, it's very clearly saying, Sarva dharmam parijata, mam ekam sharam raja, aham tam sarva papebhyo, mokshayami ma sucha, that you give up everything. So Krishna is saying, abandon all varieties of religion. Of course, when Prabhupada is mentioning the word dharma in the Sanskrit sloka, he's translating as religion. But religion is the nearest we can get in English language. But actual word, the dharma means that your occupation, your eternal occupation, or whatever occupation you do. So Prabhupada actually gives a nice definition of dharma. Dharma is explained that the dharma of water is to make things wet. Dharma of fire is to burn. Dharma of the living entity is to surrender to the Supreme Lord and serve him. So Krishna is saying, surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So in order to break away from the shackles of Maya, we just have to surrender to Krishna. And once we show that indication to Krishna, yes, dear Lord, I want to surrender to you. I want to live my life according to your ways. Then you'll be free from the shackles, and then you'll be liberated. So Prabhupada is very nicely explaining in this little, so we get this chance, and if we are not educated by our teachers, by our forefathers, by our leaders, by our government, by our gurus, by our relatives, how to accept the lotus feet of Krishna, who is canvassing, Sarva Dharmam Parijata Mamekam Saranam Vraja. Give up all this nonsense engagement, trying to become Krishna or God. Give up this, surrender unto me. This is education. So Krishna, Prabhupada is speaking this in a letter he wrote in 1972. So he's emphasizing that don't try to become God, don't try to be controllers. Give up all this nonsense. Simply surrender to me, and I will take care of you. So Krishna is asking us to surrender. So I am saying, in my understanding, Krishna is not just saying surrender, but he's saying surrender unto me. Krishna's loving invitation. Now, this is the underlining principle. Krishna's loving invitation. When Krishna says surrender unto me, he's lovingly telling you, I'm inviting you, come to me, surrender unto me. But we have a misconception of what surrender is. So this is us, and here is Krishna. And what is Krishna saying? Come to me. I've been waiting for you for a long time. So Krishna is stretching his arms out, welcoming us, that we are lost in this bewilderment of this material illusion. Come to me. I will guide you and I will show you how to actually really live your life full of happiness and bliss. But unfortunately, we do not want to take the words of Krishna. We are more inclined to take the words of Maya's illusionary energy, enticing us that there is still enjoyment in this material world. And Prabhupada many times quotes Prahlad Maharaj, chewing the chewed. You cannot get more out of something which is already been chewed. So you cannot get more flavor. So we are trying to do that, thinking that maybe there is still little nectar left here. Let me try. And of course, that struggle will just bring you frustration. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's instructions come to the aid of those of us who shudder to the mention of the word surrender. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great acharya in our line, he has given many instructions to us. And most of us, when we hear the word surrender, we shudder and say, why? I don't want to become slave to someone. But surrender in Krishna's term has totally different meaning. So I'll relate a short story in this connection. This is a story we can all relate to. Just imagine that this is all about us, you and me. So growing up, my older brother and I would sometimes get into physical fights. I can't remember what we would fight about. But a few times a month, when our parents weren't home, we would end up in a skirmish. Can you please mute yourselves? I can't remember what we would fight about, but a few times a month when our parents weren't home, we would end up in a skirmish. He would often bend my arms behind my back, telling me to surrender. Surrender, brother. I would scream and push and stomp until the pain would become unbearable. Then I would yell, brother, I surrender. He would triumphantly release my arm, bragging about his victory. I remember feeling angry and vengeful. I even decided to stop biting my nails so I could use them as a weapon to defend myself. I hated having to surrender to him. Now, when we are faced, as I explained earlier on, under the control of Maya, illusionary energy, we have to surrender forcefully to Maya's whims. We have no choice. And here, of course, we are in a similar situation where we don't want to surrender. We hate surrendering, but we have no choice because the pain and the overpowering energy of the Lord's Maya potency is so strong that we cannot fight it, but to surrender. So here is saying that I will defend myself somehow or other, but I hate surrendering. So this is our condition. So when I first heard Krishna's word in the Bhagavad Gita telling me to give up everything and surrender unto him, I winced. That word surrender carried an emotional charge. So from very childhood, we have seen the pain which comes from surrender. And we relate to Krishna's surrender to that pain. So we are emotionally charged with this pain and trouble in this material world. We relating to surrendering to something which we do not want to submit ourselves to. But here Krishna is saying, lovingly, come to me. After getting past my initial negative responses to the word, I wanted to know more about what Krishna means when he uses the word surrender, or in Sanskrit, sharanam. I learned that sharanam is often translated as shelter. Now, this is most important. When Krishna is saying, Sarva dharmam parijata mamekam sarvaja, surrender unto me, give up everything, actually that surrender has a different connotation also. It means sharanam, taking shelter of Krishna. So when we actually understand that sharanam, that surrender means taking shelter of Krishna, it is a whole different meaning. So the surrender Krishna talks about differs from the surrender my brother demanded from me. Krishna's call for surrender is loving invitation to come under his complete shelter. So again, I emphasize, when Krishna is saying, give up everything, come to me. He's not just telling you, give up everything and just come to me and surrender to me, But then the next line is saying, Aham tam sarva papebhyo, I'll free you from all kinds of miseries and difficulties. Just simply commit yourself to me, and I will show you how to be free from this disease condition. So although the Bhagavad Gita is apparently a private conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, Krishna intended that this teaching to Arjuna would be available to us. He is giving knowledge of himself that will help us understand why at the end of his talk, he can ask us to give up all other paths of progressing in human life and just surrender unto him. Anyone who has faith in all these things Krishna has said about himself in the Bhagavad Gita will be convinced that he is worthy of our surrender and love. So this is the underlying process, that when Krishna is asking us to surrender and give up all paths of progressing in human life, he is lovingly telling you, come, take my shelter. And we are fully convinced about the words of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, then we can surrender to the Supreme Lord in very loving exchanges. In our Gaudiya tradition, the disciplic line descending from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has elaborated on the word Sharana. He, in his collection of songs titled Saranagati, the goal of surrender, he gives us a conceptual orientation of what pure surrender looks like and how we can practice to achieve the status of Saranagati, or a fully surrendered devotee. So, of course, as I mentioned earlier on, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of the great acharyas in our line, he has written many wonderful songs, but actually these songs are meditation, his personal meditation, and he's showing us through his own personal meditation of how to take shelter of Krishna and how to understand our own position, and then come to that original supreme goal, the goal of surrender, and that is to become a first-class devotee of Krishna in the spirit of serving the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. He describes the 6 practices of those serious about dedicating their lives to Sri Krishna. 1, accepting things favorable to devotional service. So please make a note of this. 2, rejecting things unfavorable to devotional service. 3, accepting that Sri Krishna is our only maintainer. 4, accepting that Sri Krishna is our only protector. 5, developing a deep sense of humility. And 6, fully giving ourselves for the purpose of Sri Guru and Sri Krishna. In the beginning of our devotional life, it is critical to learn to distinguish between what helps and what hurts our spiritual advancement. When we first become involved in devotional life, we brought many misconceptions about what was favorable for spiritual progress. Again, this is very important that we have to understand that when we are first exposed to Krishna consciousness and devotional practices, we bring a lot of misconception with us and thinking what is actually spiritual life. But we don't need to bring our misconceptions, because it is very clearly spelled out for us by the acharyas, Srila Prabhupada, in the transcendental literatures of Vedic studies. And these will give us a very clear understanding. There is no need to have some misconception or speculation. It is very clearly laid out for us. Prior to meeting devotees, we would walk barefoot everywhere. Considering this is a spiritual practice, we were amazed to learn that devotees wore shoes outside, and that, with the exception of walking in a holy place, going barefoot was discouraged. So sometimes we thought that this is a good practice, walking barefoot, and thinking this is spiritual. There's nothing spiritual about it. But here it clearly says that unless it is a holy place, sanctified place, then we don't wear shoes. But otherwise, shoes are there, is common sense to protect our feet from getting hurt. We also thought spiritual life meant to hardly eat or sleep. We had been trying to reduce both beyond what was healthy for our body. We quickly learned that spiritual life involves being balanced in our material needs, avoiding too much or too little. So again, Krishna is explaining also neither do too much or too little. You have to bring a balance. So we know what is our balance. And I generally say that as individually, we all have our own individual balance. As it is stated in an English idiom, saying that you know what is best for you. You know what makes you comfortable. And therefore, when you know what is good for you and what is not good for you, what is too much for you, what is too little for you, when you find that and you are feeling very comfortable with that, then that is your balance. So in other words, one man's food is another man's poison. So what may be good for me may not be good for you. Therefore, each one of us have to find our own balance. And when we find the balance, we will know we are comfortable. And when we are comfortable, then that indicates that you have found your balance. The association of devotees help to understand what was favorable and what wasn't. Once we have the foundational understanding, it is up to us to make choice that will help us advance. Srila Prabhupada told us that sense gratification is like salt. We need a little, but not too much. Similarly, some renunciation and detachment can help us advance, especially in the beginning of our spiritual journey. But too much can harden our heart. So just like as Prabhupada is giving very nice analogy, salt is nice, it enhances the flavor of your food, but if it's too much, then it really is unpalatable. And it will disturb you and you won't be able to even enjoy or relish or even eat to some extent. We have to discard it. So here Prabhupada is saying that renunciation, detachment is there, it will help us advance, but you have to do gradually, not all of a sudden from one extreme to the other extreme. But if you practice this process of Krishna consciousness as is explained by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, then slowly and gradually that renunciation and detachment will come through knowledge and understanding. And these will bring you to a permanent status of renunciation and detachment. Otherwise, jumping from one extreme to the other extreme, you may go to the other extreme and very quickly you'll fall back again. And this will be not very helpful for your spiritual life. It is important for people starting on the path of bhakti to have good guidance. Devotees, they can trust to help them make good choices based on their individual nature. What might be too much for one may be too little for another. Finding a more advanced devotee who understands our psychology is very helpful in our treading the path. So again, Krishna also recommends to take shelter of a devotee who is advanced, who is much more experienced in this matter. And by taking advantage of his experience, we can also benefit and learn a great deal of how to make progress on our path of bhakti. Those who have imbibed the mood of surrender will see Sri Krishna as their only maintainer. They won't be anxious about their maintenance and will have complete confidence that Sri Krishna will provide for all their needs. So this is a very important concept to imbibe in our hearts and our minds, that those who have the mood of surrender to Krishna will understand. He is our maintainer. As Krishna says, Aham tam sarva papebhyo, I'll free you from everything. Don't worry. I will take charge of you now. I will provide for you. So there is no need to be in anxiety of anything. Krishna is going to take care of us. And if you speak to many devotees who joined this movement in the early days, who surrendered to Krishna and Prabhupada, and after maybe 40, 50, 60 years later, you will find that they are very comfortably situated, and Krishna has actually fulfilled his bargain of taking care of them. They do their part, but they know that ultimately the Lord is the source of their supply. That means that we have to do our part, and Krishna will take care of the rest. As Krishna says, I have given you intelligence, use that intelligence, and the rest I will take care of you. For example, you're feeling hungry and you need to eat something to satisfy the pangs of your hunger, and there is a very nice banquet laid up on the table, and you sit down there and just look at the nice, beautiful, palatable foodstuffs all laid down on the table for you. You can see with the eyes is very nice and colorful, and the fragrance is very enticing, and the mouth is salivating, and you see everything, and you think, well, Krishna is my provider. I will just sit here and let me see if Krishna provides. But Krishna has provided to you all this banquet. All you need to do is use your intelligence. He's given you legs, walk to the table. He's given you hands, pick up a plate and take what you want. And then use your hand to put the morsels of prasadam into your mouth. And as it goes into your mouth, and you taste this flavor of different foodstuffs, and it goes into your stomach, then it'll kill the pangs of your hunger. And Krishna says, I have provided, but you do your bit, I will do my bit. So then this faith is a central piece of surrender. And those who have developed deep faith in this principle are released from much anxiety. So Krishna is saying this, don't worry, I will take over everything, you do your part. I also given you intelligence, how to use your intelligence properly, execute it nicely, and then you will be free from all anxieties. In the early stages of bhakti, we develop our faith in Sri Krishna as our maintainer by reading stories about how he maintains his devotees. Many stories in the scriptures demonstrate Sri Krishna's commitment to provide for all his devotees' needs. Now again, we take shelter of the scriptures. Scriptures are full of wonderful recitation of examples of how Krishna is taking care of his devotees' needs. So in this relation, there is one nice example. When Narada Muni approached the hunter Magrari, Narada asked him to give up his sinful habit of half killing animals and leaving them to die. He enlightened the hunter about karma, telling him now in his next life, he would have to suffer the fate similar to that of the poor creatures he was torturing. So Narada Muni is enlightening Magrari that, look, what you are doing is very sinful. Don't do these things, because you are actually entangling yourself in more and more karmic reactions, and in your next life you will suffer the same fate. Magrari understood by the mercy of Narada Muni. After the hunter had developed some faith in Sri Narada Muni as his spiritual guide, Sri Narada asked him to break his bow. Magrari hesitated, wondering how he and his family would survive if he gave up his means of livelihood. Now again, this is our position. Krishna is saying, give up all these bad habits and depend on me. I will guide you. I will show you how to get your livelihood and your means of surviving nicely and happily. But Magrari is kind of thinking that if I give up this bow and arrow, which is means of my livelihood, how will my family and I survive? So Narada Muni is saying, Narada assured him that if he took to the devotional path, Sri Krishna would provide for all his needs. The hunter complied with Sri Narada's request, breaking his bow and taking up spiritual practice of chanting Krishna's holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So many of Magrari's neighbors became aware of his transformation and began to honor him as a saintly person. Every day they would bring food to him and his family. In fact, the quantity of food far exceeded his needs, and he had to ask that the amount be reduced. So just see that because Magrari gave up, he became a wonderful devotee of Krishna, he developed saintly qualities, and people all around was saying, here is a saintly person. It is our duty to take care of the saintly person. Of course, this is Krishna's arrangement, and he was getting more than his need. And he had to actually beg them that please don't bring so much. So Krishna will give you more than you can handle. But we have to have faith in his words. Hearing such narrations help us have faith in the principles of seeing Sri Krishna as our maintainer. And that faith enables us to stretch ourselves in the ways that help us to see Sri Krishna's maintenance in action. So these stories are actually showing us how Krishna is working, and actually it will increase our faith in Krishna, that he is our maintainer, he's our protector, he will take care of all our needs. The next principle of surrender is humility. The mood of humility is critical for spiritual progress. Real surrender comes from realizing we can't do anything without the mercy and the help of the Lord. Humility allows us to let Sri Krishna take the lead in our lives. It allows us to open our hearts to his instructions and to serve him through his representatives in the material world. So this aspect is also very important. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his transcendental teachings of Siksastikam prayers, one of the prayers is Trinada Pisunichena, Tarora Pisunichena, Amanina Mani Dena Kirtanya Sadahari. Become humble in the blade of grass, become tolerant in the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and be ready to offer all respect unto others. And when you develop this state of humility, you can chant the holy names very nicely. So this is the instructions of the Lord himself. And we follow that. And here the last line is very important, that if you follow the instructions and serve him, means serve the Supreme Lord through his representatives in the material world. This describes that the spiritual masters, the pure devotees, the saintly persons are the external manifestation of Krishna as gurus in the material world to guide you as Krishna's principles. So we have to serve his representatives, and through him we serve Krishna. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that the beginning of humility is the absence of enjoying mentality. Our spiritual nature is pleasure seeking. Sachit Ananda Vigraha, that we are full of eternity, full of bliss, and full of knowledge. So it is spiritual in nature to seek pleasure, but we are looking for enjoyment in matter, in things that don't endure. We become takers, exploiters, and exploiters. To reinstate our spiritual consciousness, we need to practice giving and serving. Again, this is very important, that it is our spiritual nature to seek pleasure, as mentioned in the scriptures, Sachit Ananda, that we have that Ananda quality, but we are looking for this enjoyment in the matter, in things that do not endure, they don't last for long, and we become takers. We want to take and exploit. To reinstate this spiritual consciousness and come back to our original constitutional position, we need to practice giving and serving. When you start doing this giving and serving, then automatically you will also benefit from receiving great things from others. The last principle of Saranagati is to fully give ourselves, the body, mind, and heart, to the Lord's service. This means we no longer have any separate interest from Sri Krishna's. To practice this principle, we serve advanced Vaishnavas and share Krishna consciousness with others. This is the basic principle of giving and serving. And when we begin to do giving and serving, then we will be situated in our natural constitutional position, and we will become automatically blissful and happily situated in our existence in the material world while we are preparing to go back home to the spiritual world. Saranagati sets the stage for our loving sentiments to fully develop, practicing these 6 principles encapsulates Abhidaya, or the way and means to attain love of Sri Krishna, that he reciprocates our efforts to surrender. What is this? What is that reciprocation? So as I said, if we develop this mood of giving and serving, then Krishna is giving this very important principle of reciprocation. So see, Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 11, Yetha mam prapdiyante tam tataiva bhajamyaham mam vartman anu vartate manushya mam partha sarvasya. Is all surrendered unto me. I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. So of course, Krishna is emphasizing here. Yethamam prapayante. As you surrender unto me, I will reciprocate with you. And so as we are giving to Krishna, Krishna is also giving to us. As we are serving Krishna, Krishna is also serving us. This is a wonderful exchange between the living entity and the Supreme Lord. In the material world, when you try to serve some master, when it is a wrongful surrender, is a painful surrender, you will not get the same kind of reciprocation of love and compassion. We become enlightened by knowledge of who we really are, an eternal spiritual being who has a loving relationship with Sri Krishna and all of his associates. We also become joyful and experience the transcend reality that becomes more and more relishable as we progress on the spiritual path. So as we transcend these lower modes, and as I said, giving up one to get something else. As I in last week's presentation, I showed you the example of 3 glasses: one full glass of material attachment, one glass full of spiritual attachment, and in between the emptiness. So we have to transit from fullness of material things, empty it out, and fill it up with spirituality. Then, as it's saying here, the more and more we become relishable in the progress of this path. So that is a reality. And those who have seriously taken to this path will actually give their own examples that yes, they are experiencing more and more happiness as they are following this path of bhakti. So in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, text 23, this is again quoting our real position. What is the soul? So saying, Nainam chidanti sastrani, nainam dadati pravaktaha, na chainam kledayanti apo, na society murtahaya. Excuse me. The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by wind. So this is saying the soul is not affected by all these things. Now, when we identify ourselves as the body, then body can be cut to pieces, body can be burnt by fire, body can be moistened by water, and also we can have withering by the effects of wind. So Prabhupada explains in the purport, nor was it ever possible to cut the individual soul from the original supreme soul. Rather, the individual souls are eternally separated parts of the supreme soul because they are atomic individual souls eternally, sanatan. They are not temporarily manifestation, they are eternally there. Only for temporary position, they are forgetful because they are covered by the illusionary energy of this material world. They are prone to be covered by the illusionary energy, and thus they become separated from the association of the Supreme Lord. Just as the spark of the fire, although one in quality with the fire, are prone to be extinguished when out of the fire. So this is another analogy given that we have all seen bonfires lit and the fire is burning vigorously. Sometimes the sparks come out, and when the sparks go further away from the fire, they lose their potency and become diminished. And the same spark again comes closer to the fire, regains its natural same quality as the fire. So in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 34, again instructions are given how to progress in spiritual life. Krishna is saying, Padhiti pranipratena pariprashna sevaya. Upadaksayanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshana. That by approaching, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So again, Krishna is emphasizing, as I'm also making this presentation, that we take experience from the advanced devotees because they have experience. They can give us benefit of their experience and guide us through this darkness to light knowledge. The path of spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. The Lord therefore advises us to approach a bona fide spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession from the Lord himself. No one can be bona fide spiritual master without following the principles of disciplic succession. The Lord is the original spiritual master, and a person in the disciplic succession can convey the message of the Lord as it is to his disciple. No one can be spiritually realized by manufacturing his own process, as is fashionable of the foolish pretenders. The Bhagavatam, Canto 6, chapter 3, text 19 says, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranita. The path of religion is directly enunciated by the Lord. Therefore, mental speculation or dry arguments cannot help lead one to the right path, nor by independent study of books of knowledge. One can progress Nor by independent study of books of knowledge can one progress in spiritual life. So you cannot buy a book and just study it. You have to actually take shelter, as mentioned by Krishna, of a realized soul. One has to approach a bona fide spiritual master to receive the knowledge. Such a spiritual master should be accepted in full surrender, and one should serve the spiritual master like a menial servant without false prestige. Satisfaction of self, satisfaction of the self-realized spiritual master is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. This is the fundamental principle in the material world. Krishna is giving us this insight. If you want to really make advancement, then become a humble servant of the spiritual master. This is a secret of advancement in spiritual life. Inquiries and submission constitutes the proper combination of spiritual understanding. Unless there is submission and service, inquiries from a learned spiritual master will not be effective. One must be able to pass the test of spiritual master. And when he sees genuine desire of this disciple, he automatically blesses the disciple with genuine spiritual understanding. In this verse, both blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. Not only should one hear submissively from the spiritual master, but one must also get a clear understanding from him in submission and service and inquiries. Bona fide spiritual master is by nature very kind towards the disciple. Therefore, when the student is submissive and is always ready to render service, the reciprocation of knowledge and inquiry becomes perfect. In these instructions, we have a perfect path to become detached from this material disease. And if you follow this, then I can assure you, by Prabhupada's blessings and by Krishna's blessings, we'll become free from this disease condition. So thank you very much for this time. Please take advantage of this, and I'm sure you will all benefit from it. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Indeed, a very wonderful presentation. And the point that you brought out, the fear of the word surrender and the interpretation from that particular word in the verse from the Bhagavad Gita where he says Sharanam, where he talks about shelter. So that changes the whole perspective and the fear associated with the word surrender, particularly in context to the world that we live in, where surrender word is like, everyone talks about freedom, talks about independence. So surrender is a very kind of avoidable term. But when you understand it as a shelter, then it certainly becomes very meaningful and purposeful. The other points that you brought out, Maharaj, were extremely wonderful. Is the whole idea of humility. Submission and surrender without humility is very, very difficult. So, humility as a virtue is extremely important. Our material endeavors in material life is driven more by false prestige because of the wrong identification of our identity with the body as opposed to the soul. So humility becomes an important aspect. And last but not the least, you brought out a very wonderful point that we cannot learn this art of surrender to Krishna by simply reading some book of knowledge. It involves inquiry, submission, and service. So thank you very much, Maharaj, for the pain that you took to present this wonderful subject matter that we presented to you to present to us. Now it is our turn to reflect upon these illuminations that you brought out and make our own lives transformative by taking the shelter of these wonderful instructions. So thank
Wasn't
you
very
again.
easy. Wasn't very easy to prepare this. And had put
I'm
a lot of
sure,
thought in
Maharaj.
it.
Yes,
Had to put
indeed.
a lot of thought in it.
Absolutely. And I think some of the slides were really very illustrative. So thank you very much, Maharaj. We are greatly indebted for you to, put in this effort and heart into these presentations for the sake of all of us. So thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, we will have a few questions. So I will just check out. Um, there is a question in the beginning. We may try to surrender, but it is partial. We still have material desires that we are attached to. How do we move past this stage? Is it a decision we make? Is it through the mercy of the devotees? Or is it a gradual process of becoming exhausted in the pursuit of one's material desires before coming to a point of complete surrender to Krishna?
Well, Krishna is explaining this process, that it is a gradual process. As I said, we cannot jump from one extremity to the other extremity, because for many, many lifetimes, we have been conditioned in this material world. So to become unconditioned, it takes time. So I will give this example, that if you persevere in the process of bhakti, gradually every day, our prayer should be Krishna, that Krishna, please help me. Krishna, please help me. So when we show our dependent on Krishna, and Krishna, out of his kindness, will see that you are always asking for help. We are having a hard time. He will then give an extending hand and he'll help us. So just like anything else, we cannot speed up these things artificially. But we have everyone, as I mentioned in my presentation, we have our different natures. And according to our own nature, we will progress. Some may go fast, some may go slow, some go medium pace. But nonetheless, we should not be fearful, because we have now begun a journey by the mercy of Krishna. If we persevere and keep to this journey, we will come to the successful end whenever Krishna decides. We cannot decide how quick we go there. Krishna will see in his own time. That's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Karmani eva adhikarastu ma phaleshu kadachin. He said, just do your duty. Just simply do your duty with sincerity. Ma phaleshu. I will take care of when and how results will come. So we should have full faith in Krishna, as I made in my presentation, and trust Krishna. He knows best. He knows past, present, and future. So therefore, he knows the full picture. We are not aware of the full picture. We only know the past, which we have experienced, and the past is only of this life, not the previous lives. Secondly, we are not fully aware of the present. We know some things, but not everything. And the future is completely in darkness. But Krishna knows past, present, and future. Therefore, we have to trust him and go with our process. And as I said in my presentation, that by the mercy of Krishna, by the mercy of Guru, when they see the disciple is sincerely trying his best or her best, then the spiritual master will reciprocate and will gradually make progress. And as we are making progress, we will develop, we begin to test the pleasantness of this process. And that is an indication that we are now making advancement. And just like in the material sense, if there is a very nice palatable dish and you get a little bit and you like it so much that you want more, so you'll go for the second helping, and then you will go for the third helping until your belly says no more now, but you won't stop, and you'll say, okay, next time I'll get more, and you still want it more again. And the second time the preparation is made, you go for more helping and more. So spiritual life is like that. As we begin to experience the taste, the nectar of the service to the Lord and the Vaishnavas, then we want more and more. And this is an indication that we are now becoming cured of a disease condition.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. So I invite all the devotees, if you have any questions, kindly raise your hands, unmute yourself, and we will ask that question. So we do have a question from Yatharth. Maharaj, Yatharth is from the Gopal Fun School. He attends regularly on every Friday, Saturdays rather. His question is, if we don't want to take Krishna's shelter, then will he overpower us so we take his shelter, or he will allow us to surrender to into Maya and get infected by this material disease?
Well, as I said in one of the slide presentation, with Krishna's hands coming out and saying, I'm inviting you, please come to me. This is an invitation of love. Now, we have to understand, as I gave that little story of older brother and younger brother, how he was forced to surrender and become dominated by his elder brother. That is Maya's way of doing things. Now, Krishna's way of doing things is out of love. So Krishna says, I have given you independence. You exercise your independence. And when you exercise your independence, that is called love. And when you come through the spirit of love and come to Krishna, then Krishna says, Yetamam prapayante, I will also come to you out of love. Krishna cannot force you, because Krishna is not interested in forcing anyone to become his servant or take his shelter, because Krishna doesn't get pleasure out of that. But he gets pleasure when you freely come to him by your own free will. That is what Krishna is interested in. That is why it's called, this is the loving process of bhakti. It's not forceful process of bhakti. So therefore, Krishna will never force you. So choice is ours. Either we take one or the other. The important thing is that by Krishna's arrangement, he will make sure that if you are seeking for guidance, then he will put both plates in front of you, material disease and spiritual disease. It's up to you what you want. You want infected by material disease, or you want to be infected by spiritual disease. Now, spiritual disease doesn't mean it's a disease condition in a negative way. It is a positive way that you will develop more and more hankering for Krishna. So it's up to you. The choice is given to you. Two choices are in front of you. Krishna is saying, I have given you the two choice. I have given you free independent choice. I have given you intelligence. Now, how you exercise that is up to you. And if you do it properly, then Krishna says, welcome. If you are saying, no, Krishna, I don't want you, then Krishna says, that's okay. I have created the material world for you, and I've created my external energy, Maya Devi, to give you all facilities for you to try and play God. And you can play God all you like. So, as I said, Krishna will never force us in anything, but he will give us opportunity that out of our suffering, we can come out. And he says, here, free yourself from the suffering, come to me.
Thank you, Maharaj. So, so we have Anupama Radharani Mataji. Just one sec, Maharaj. So, her question is, how can we understand Krishna takes care of us when we see that innocent people or devotees are attacked and killed, and may become fearful that that may be our fate as well? How can we understand Krishna takes care of us when we see that innocent people or devotees are attacked and killed, and may become fearful that that may be our fate as well? In such a case, how can we have firm faith?
First of all, when we say innocent, is the wrong inferences. How do you know that person or devotee is innocent? That is one. Because we may seem innocent in our present situation, but in our past or past lives, we may have done certain things which were not very pleasant. And therefore, we have to pay for our karmic reactions. Now, in terms of, say, devotees put into difficulties, Arjuna was put into great difficulty. He had to fight a battle. In fact, Arjuna said to Krishna that I don't want to fight this battle, Krishna. I don't want to kill people. So Krishna is then speaking Bhagavad Gita and saying, look, Arjuna, this is your duty. You're fighting for Dharma. I'm with you. Don't worry. Nothing will happen to you. So we have to have that faith. Now, if some devotees experience, say, a violent death, then there must be something in that from their previous lives which Krishna is freeing you from. Just like Prabhupada gives example sometimes that if someone has killed a man and murdered a person, then according to Vedic principle, the king would punish him by capital punishment, and he would hang him or kill him basically as a punishment for killing another person. And Prabhupada said that is not bad, because that person is now freed from that reaction of a killing, and then will get a better chance in next life to make advancement. But if you are not punished for your misbehavior or wrongdoings, then that punishment will come later on at some stage. So we should not look at it in a negative way. We should look at it that whatever Krishna gives us, it's my deserve. Krishna will never give you anything which you do not deserve. Now, sometimes he may put us in a difficult situation to actually show us how to become free from this difficult situation. He will not just give you one thing and not the other. He will give you the problem and he'll give you the solution also. So we have to trust him. And my understanding is that, like I said, Arjuna was put in the most great difficult situation to fight the battle. But Krishna said, don't worry, do your duty, I'm with you. So we have to have that faith that Krishna is with us, and whatever he does best for freeing us. And suppose a devotee is violently killed in some attack or something, we will see that as a violent act. But Krishna is taking that position to free that devotee, that, okay, you'll be killed by this means, but at the end, since you surrendered to me, my arms are open, I'm welcoming you back home, back to Godhead. So we have to see in the proper spirit. We don't see in the negative spirit. I hope that can answers your question.
Anupama Mataji, you're
Muted.
mute yourself. You're not able to? Oh yeah, sorry. Can you unmute yourself now? You should be able to. Yeah, can you unmute?
Yeah. Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for that answer. In fact, this topic of surrender was just so perfectly timed. Just for the past 2-3 days, I've been contemplating this, and you spoke on this topic. Most wonderful lecture. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you, Anupama Mataji. Hare Krishna. So we go to, so this is from Murlidhar Prabhu from Kuwait. Does religion mean dharma or the occupation? Please explain, Guru Maharaj. Does religion mean dharma or occupation?
Religion in an ordinary sense means just kind of faith you have. You may have Christian religion, Muslim religion, Hindu religion, Jain religion, Buddhist religion, so forth. But actually in Sanatan Dharma, in the Vedic understanding, dharma means your occupation. And as Krishna and Prabhupada has already elaborated that, the occupation of a living entity, the spirit soul, is Jivere Saruphoy Nitya Krishna Das. We are eternally servant of Krishna. And because we are forgetful of that, then we get into trouble. But there is no such thing as religion. What Prabhupada explains is that the science of Krishna consciousness is a science, it's not a religion. But because commonly everybody understands is the word religion, so we kind of use that word religion. But in reality, this is not a religion. This is a science of Krishna consciousness, science of self-realization, and it is teaching us very scientifically what is our occupation. And our occupation is to serve Krishna with proper understanding. So that is the definition. So that is why sometimes it's very difficult because of language. See, in Sanskrit, there is no word for religion, because religion doesn't exist. The only word is dharma, and dharma for other languages than Sanskrit is religion. That is which means closest to dharma or one's faith in the Supreme.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. It is wonderful, Maharaj. And also, we have taken that few points like giving and serving to Krishna, so that that is the proper path. So that would be wonderful, Maharaj. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Not just giving to Krishna, giving to everyone. See, giving and serving. Giving everything, whatever is in your capacity, to others, and through others you give it to Krishna, and serving the Vaishnavas. So when we serve the Vaishnavas, it is said that Krishna takes their service through the Vaishnava. So that principle we must understand. Of course, we should not serve the karmis, because karmis is just serving their, gratifying their senses. Yeah. So we have to draw a line that we want to serve Krishna and his devotees.
Yes, Maharaj. Yes, Maharaj. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhu and Mataji. Maharaj, we will end here. There's one small question I'll ask from Srinivas. but there's an appreciation from Achara Mataji. Hare Krishna Maharaj Danvat pranams. Thank you for such a wonderful um, uh, and simple explanation of such an important topic. So Srinivas is asking, the soldiers who are martyred have the same benefit of the army who were killed in Kurukshetra and reach Goloka or the higher planets? So
Well,
that'll be the last question.
okay, I mean, his answer is very short. Yes, Prabhupada explains that anyone who left their bodies in the presence of Krishna definitely will go back to the spiritual world.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Maharaj. And we will now, first and foremost, um, we want to, all the children, Yatharth and others, Brinda, you may be able to identify. If you're there, so kindly you can unmute yourself and also, have your videos open so that Maharaj can see you and you can seek the blessings from Maharaj. So Maharaj, I'm going to put you on a spotlight and I'm going to put Yatharth, who asked that very nice question. Maharaj, that's Yatharth. He's a regular.
Hare Krishna, very nice young boy. He become first class devotee.
Yatharth, you can unmute yourself and say Hare Krishna to Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Very nice to see a young person like you take Krishna consciousness. So you will have blessings of all the parampara to become a first class devotee. Hare Krishna.
Jai. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you, Yatharth. So we will go back to our, so anybody else from the children? Linda, is there anyone else? Okay. All right. So Maharaj,
my daughter is there.
oh, your daughter is there. So does she want to switch on Lavkesh Prabhu? There she is. So Maharaj, I'm going to put her on the spotlight and I'll put Maharaj on the spotlight. And here you are.
Hare
Maharaj,
Krishna.
that's, what's your name?
Bhavika.
Bhavika. Maharaj, Lavkesh Prabhu is a regular attendee of our morning and evening Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita sessions. And there is Bhavika, his wonderful daughter. So, Bhavika,
She
you want to
basically,
seek blessings from Maharaj?
Prabhuji, she attends the classes in Sharjah of Bhagavad Gita
Wonderful.
through Nita Mataji.
Jai Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Very nice. So Bhavika is a very wonderful name. Bhavika means you are full of devotion. Your bhava is directed. So keep going, and I'm sure Krishna will bless you unlimitedly, and you will become a wonderful Vaishnava. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Lavkesh Prabhu. Thank you, Bhavika.
Thank you.
So, we again go back. So, yeah. Maharaj, before we go to, the final where we, meet the devotees, Maharaj, we want to have the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra from your lotus mouth so that as a prayer and a blessing for Akarshana, who's one of the students in Gopal Fun School, who's been in the hospital for last 7 days. So Maharaj, we will follow you.
Hare Krishna. So this is a prayer for, what is her name?
Akarshana.
Akarshana. So we'll pray for Akarshana's well-being and get out of the hospital as soon as possible and become a very healthy person so she can continue in her spiritual endeavors. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Rama, Hare Rama,
Krishna
Hare
Krishna Hare
Krishna,
Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
All right. So thank you very much for your blessings and prayers. So now we'll have a quick chit chat with Maharaj. So if you can unmute yourself, yeah, please, if everyone can sorry, mute yourself. I'm sorry. So we have Tirthraj, Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Prabhu and Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Guru Maharaj, Tandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Every Saturday we are hearing today everything most important for us today Saranagari. Please, Guru Maharaj, allow me to example about Saranagari. Please allow, because Srila Prabhupada came to know Kulashaira in his glorification, Kulashaira saying, for example, when a surgeon cut the body for the operation, he makes pain, even though the patient